Hello. Today we are continuing with the integration of the New York City schools, a personal narrative. This is volume 2. My first 2 volumes dealt with my experiences in the public schools in Brooklyn and in Staten Island, the elementary schools. And now we're going to move into my junior high school experience. In I'm looking at the years now, this would be 1966, if I remember correctly, 65, 66, that I started junior high school. I mentioned in the elementary school that the vice principal at PS 45 would not accept my Iowa test scores because she said they were impossible. Black kids couldn't be smarter than the white kids in her mind. This is how racist New York City was. But when I got to junior high school, they accepted my scores and they put me in the program called SP, which was Special Progress. And you could either go in 2 grades and skip the 8th grade and go right to 9th, or 3. My mother made the decision that I should not skip because she didn't want me to be in a situation where I was not going to get the math. She was worried about math, and she didn't feel that being skipped was a good idea, so she turned down skipping me. So I went to the SP program. I took French. That was the language that they offered. They offered French or Spanish, but if you had very good grades, they wanted you to take French. And so I took French, as my sister had before me, though she had gone to junior high school in Brooklyn. And I can remember in the 9th grade, starting out, once again, I was the only black child in my class, though this school, junior high school 27, Prawl Junior High School, had many more black students. And believe it or not, my mother taught in the school. She taught home economics. She was up on the 3rd floor, though I rarely saw her. The students in my class were generally fine. I developed a quick friendship with a boy by the name of John DeFlippo. I remember his father owned a pizza place in Princess Bay, Staten Island, and we used to ride the Staten Island Rapid Transit, which is the train on Staten Island. Staten Island didn't have like a formal subway. It had SIRT, Staten Island Rapid Transit. And we would go out to the Princess Bay station to eat at his father's pizza place. That was kind of fun, because I like pizza. Growing up on Staten Island, pizza was a big part of the culture. Italian food was a big part of the culture. And to me, growing up in Staten Island, when I think of comfort food, I don't think of collard greens and fried chicken and macaroni and cheese. I think of pizza, lasagna, baked ziti, ravioli, and other Italian food, and pasta. So it's kind of funny growing up. You identify with the food that you're around. Anyway, um, again, that isolation of being the only black kid in school in the class was difficult. I remember in the seventh and eighth grade, though, the teachers were fine. I think a large part of that was that my mother taught in the school, and she was well respected, and they weren't going to mess with me. And in fact, I can remember in social studies, Mr. Houseman, who really took a liking to me because I was very good in social studies, and in fact, all through school, history and social studies was easy for me. That was like my favorite subject. But I can remember having a science teacher named Mr. Jacobson in ninth grade, who to this moment, rather, when I think about him, it just makes me angry. He was this bald-headed guy, and much like me. And he, one day in class, started making fun of me. This is a teacher. And he tied this yellow ribbon. It wasn't a thin ribbon, it was a wide ribbon. He physically forced it on my head while kids were joking at me and tied this around my head. This was deeply offensive. I was very angry, but he was big. And so he forcibly did this to me. I complained to my mother about it, but I don't remember anything happening. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that, you had to go through being black, dealing with not all white teachers, but there were always ones like that. There were always white teachers, and there were always students who would laugh at it. They thought this stuff was funny. In retrospect, you want to kick their behinds. Anytime I think of just like the third grade teacher, Mrs. Cooper, who wouldn't let me participate in the class election. I don't think I missed at PS 198. I mentioned her name. I can remember being 21 years old and calling PS 198, asking to speak to her, but she had retired. That's how angry I still was, because I wanted to give her a piece of my mind. I never bothered to call back Mr. Jacobson, but to this day, I detest what he did to me. And that's the thing about racism that I think that white people totally miss, that are totally clueless about, is the psychological damage that it does, the anger that it causes you. But as I said, the biggest incident I saw of racism in junior high school wasn't directed toward me. It was directed toward another student who was not in my class, but who I had become friends with. And her name was Jane. I don't want to mention her last name, but she was half Japanese, half black. And outside of school at the end of the day, white kids used to call her repeatedly nigger Jap. This is how sick these kids are. And these kids are sick because their parents are sick. They get this from their parents. And she would be crying. I used to walk her home from school. She lived in the Markham Homes. Those of you who know Staten Island, they're no longer there, but will know what I'm talking about, the Markham Homes. After school, they would yell, nigger Jap, nigger Jap, nigger Jap. And it used to make me so angry. And she would be crying. She had long hair down her back. And I used to, walk with her home because it just infuriated me. But this is America. This is America. It's America that people don't like to talk about. Northerners like to talk about the South. But there was no difference. As Malcolm X said, the southern border of the United States is the Canadian border. And that happened throughout my years of junior high school. I was only there 2.5 years because the school had some issues with math teachers, and my mother was about excellence in education, and they didn't have math teacher. They changed math teachers when I was in the ninth grade 3 times between September and March. And she said she'd had it. And she transferred me to this private school, prep school, Richmond Town Preparatory School. I think that was a major mistake she made, but her friend, Gladys Johnson, had put her son there. And in that school, it was predominantly Italian. And the thing you got to understand about New York City is ethnic. You have Irish, Italians, Jewish kids. The Italians were the vast majority. They tended to do not as well back in those days in school. The Jewish kids tended, of course, do academically the best. Irish and Anglos were kind of in the middle. There weren't that many Anglos. And there was some Polish or some other ethnic groups. But good 80% of the island was Italian. And they were not academic, put it that way. And they resented me again in high school. There was one other black kid in my high school who was 2 years ahead of me, my mother's, Mrs. Johnson's son, Chris. And then after he graduated, I was the only black kid in the high school. And the school had a junior high school section, and eventually there was one of the black kids that was in the junior high school area. But I didn't even get to know him. I saw his face a few times. But the school was small. When I got there was only 103 kids that went from the 6th grade to the 12th grade. And my graduating class was the largest I think the school ever had, and it was 31. But the racism, especially among the Italian kids, was virulent and violent. I mean, I was attacked. I was called nigger on a daily basis. The teachers didn't do one darn thing about it. They knew about it and ignored it. I complained about it. Nothing was done about it. Before class, before the teachers came in, they would chat, nigger, 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 nigger. And they thought it was funny. Kids like Mike Lee, that was one of them. Gary Fellini was another one. And in fact, one day that I complained about it, at the end of class, as I walked out the door, a person who wasn't in my class, named Sal DeFalco, who was a senior when I was a junior, he grabbed me from behind, held my arms, and then Gary Fellini punched me in the eyes, broke my glasses, went into my eye. And back then, glasses were made out of glass. This was the fall of 1969, the month of early October. It was in October. Gary Fellini was his name. I wish you would see this video. I mean, just animals. And the school gave me a towel and didn't have the decency to have someone drive me to the hospital. I had to take the city bus. Back then it was the 113 bus on Richmond Road. And it was a long way because Richmond Town, Staten Island was way, way out in the middle of nowhere. I had to wait for a bus with a towel on my eye to go down to the local HMO. It was called HIP, down on Targy Street. So you're talking about 5 miles away. And the bus ran once every half an hour. And my mother met me down there because I called my mother up. But they didn't have the decency to take me, and nothing was done to him. I think he was suspended maybe for 1 day. He should have been prosecuted by the police. They should have called the police. They didn't do anything. That's the moment in my life when I realized that white people as a whole were not my friends, they were my enemies. There were exceptions, but the vast majority were my enemies. White America didn't give one tinker's damn about me. And I became very angry. I became very politically militant. And I hung out with, well, don't get me wrong, I hung out with a lot of white kids, the hippies. The hippies were cool, and I hung out with the hippies. We had a number of them in the school. I can name Kevin O'Hare. I mean, I remember Kevin O'Hare in school. He was a year behind me. He was a junior, Irish kid, and with red hair. We refused to say the Pledge of Allegiance and Star Spangled Banner. I never said the Star Spangled Banner and have not yet, or the Pledge of Allegiance, since that incident. And this is going back to the 9th grade. I have not, and I will never say it again, because I realize America is not my country. I am a descendant of conquered people who were kidnapped, stolen, and brought to this land. And that these people don't give a tinker's damn about us. That became very, very clear. And am I still angry about it? You're darn right. I'm still angry about it. And so that changed my whole perspective. And it had been moving in that direction. It was during the Vietnam War, and I was going to anti-war demonstrations. And I had started to see America as an imperialist nation globally. And to see part of what I was experiencing as part of what America was about as a country and always had been as a country. And that's where I'm going to stop now. But I began seeing this as part of one large picture. And it was not a good picture. And on that note, not the happiest note, but I think a note of reality, I will end this video. And we'll continue with part 3, where I move to my college years, which are a much more optimistic experience. Because for the first time since really the beginning of the 3rd grade, I became surrounded with black people. And I was surrounded with black academics in college, at Hunter College. And it changed my life for the better. And I am thankful for them to this day. All right? Please hit the like button if you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to the channel, because this is living history. A history that is not talked about very much. They talk about Boston, but they don't talk about the integration of the schools in New York. I haven't seen anything about it really online. So hit this like and continue to watch the videos. Subscribe to the channel and have a good day.